In the early days of September 2025, a new and unsettling chapter in European security began to unfold. Russian drones, cheap and simply made, crossed the border from Belarus and Ukraine into Poland, a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was not an accident. Over several days, at least 19 of these unmanned aircraft violated the sovereign airspace of a NATO country. This was a deliberate act, a clear message sent from Moscow to Warsaw, Brussels, and Washington. The drones were not sophisticated weapons, but their purpose was profound. They were designed to test the defenses, and more importantly, the resolve of the most powerful military alliance in history. The nature of the drones themselves is a critical part of the story. These were not advanced, multi-million-dollar military machines. Instead, they were Gerbera models, constructed from basic materials like wood and foam, costing only about $10,000 each. This is the same kind of low-cost technology Russia has used extensively against Ukraine. Their cheapness is their strength. By sending a swarm of these inexpensive drones, Russia created a complex problem for NATO's advanced and very expensive air defense systems. The incident immediately raised uncomfortable questions about the alliance's preparedness for this new type of warfare. The immediate response from Poland and its allies highlighted the seriousness of the situation. Polish authorities invoked Article 4 of the NATO Treaty, a formal step that calls for urgent consultations among all member states when one of them feels its security is threatened. This is a significant diplomatic action, reserved for moments of grave concern. In addition, Poland took the drastic measure of closing the airspace over major cities like Warsaw, Lublin, and Rzeszów, disrupting daily life and signaling a state of high alert. Neighboring Latvia followed suit, closing its eastern airspace, showing that the anxiety was spreading along NATO's eastern flank. The performance of NATO's air defenses during these incursions was deeply troubling. Of the 19 drones that crossed into Poland, the alliance managed to shoot down only a few. The effort involved a complex and costly deployment of assets, including Dutch F-35 fighter jets, a NATO refueling aircraft, and a German Patriot air defense system. Each interception cost millions of dollars, a stark contrast to the low cost of the drones themselves. This poor success rate, far below the 80 to 90% interception rate often achieved by Ukraine against similar attacks, exposed a critical vulnerability in NATO's defenses and its strategy for dealing with modern threats. This drone incident is not an isolated event. It is a calculated move in what many experts are calling a shadow war. A shadow war is not a traditional conflict with soldiers and tanks crossing borders in a declared invasion. Instead, it is a campaign of aggression that operates below the threshold of open warfare. It involves hybrid tactics like cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, sabotage of critical infrastructure, and, as we have just seen, provocative military actions like airspace violations. The goal is not to conquer territory directly, but to destabilize, intimidate, and divide an adversary from within, sowing chaos and doubt without triggering a full-scale military response. Russia's actions are a direct test of the NATO alliance. For years, Moscow has sought to undermine the credibility of NATO's core principle. An attack on one member is an attack on all. By sending drones into Poland, Russia is asking a pointed question. Will you really defend every inch of your territory? Will you risk escalation for a few cheap drones? The Kremlin is probing for weakness, looking to see how far it can push before the alliance pushes back forcefully. The response, or lack thereof, sends a powerful signal back to Moscow about NATO's unity and determination in this new era of confrontation. The choice of Poland as the target was strategic. As a key NATO member on the eastern flank and a steadfast supporter of Ukraine, Poland is on the front line of this new Cold War. The drones were not flying aimlessly. 5 were reportedly on a direct path toward a NATO base before they were intercepted. This was a direct threat aimed at the heart of the alliance's military presence in the region. By targeting Poland, Russia aims to intimidate the most hawkish members of NATO, hoping to create division between the eastern states who feel the threat most acutely and Western members who may feel more insulated and hesitant to risk conflict. This strategy of testing boundaries is a classic Russian tactic, updated for the 21st century. Instead of nuclear bombers testing air defenses during the Cold War, it is now swarms of inexpensive drones. The principle, however, remains the same. Russia is trying to create a sense of constant pressure and uncertainty, forcing NATO into a state of permanent crisis management. This wears down the alliance's resources. strains its political cohesion, and creates a perception of weakness. Every slow or indecisive response encourages more aggression, making the shadow war an increasingly dangerous and unpredictable reality for all of Europe. The Russian drone incursion happened at a moment of deep anxiety about the commitment of the United States to European security. The response from the Trump administration in Washington was muted, almost silent. This lack of a strong, immediate condemnation or a clear promise of support has sent a wave of fear across Europe. For decades, the American security guarantee has been the bedrock of NATO. European nations have built their defense policies around the certainty that the United States would stand with them in a crisis. Now that certainty is gone, replaced by doubt and a growing sense of isolation. This American hesitation is not new, but it has become more pronounced. The administration has openly questioned the value of the NATO alliance and has repeatedly suggested that Europe must do more to defend itself. Hints of pulling U.S. troops out of Europe and canceling joint military training exercises have been interpreted as signs of a potential American withdrawal from its long-standing international obligations. For European leaders, this is a nightmare scenario. The U.S. not only provides the bulk of NATO's military power, but also its critical leadership. Without a committed America, NATO feels like a ship without a captain, adrift in dangerous waters. The weak American response to the drones over Poland has amplified these fears exponentially. European allies were looking to Washington for leadership, for a clear signal that an attack on one is truly an attack on all. Instead, they saw inaction. This fuels a dangerous narrative that the U.S. commitment to Article 5, the Mutual Defense Clause, is no longer absolute. If the U.S. will not respond forcefully to a direct violation of a key ally's airspace, what would it do in a more serious crisis? This question now hangs over every strategic discussion in European capitals, from Paris to Warsaw. In the absence of strong American leadership, European nations are scrambling to react. French President Emmanuel Macron announced he would send Rafale jets to bolster the eastern flank, and the United Kingdom has called for strengthening air defenses over Poland. But these are piecemeal solutions. The reality is that no single European nation, nor even the European Union as a collective, can replace the military might and strategic weight of the United States. The feeling of being left to fend for themselves is growing, forcing a painful and rapid reassessment of European defense capabilities and the very future of the transatlantic alliance. The drone crisis has exposed a fundamental truth. NATO's strength has always been its unity, and that unity is now under severe strain. The alliance was founded on the principle of collective defense, a promise that all members would stand together against any aggressor. This promise has been the most effective deterrent to conflict in Europe for over 75 years. However, if that promise is seen as unreliable, the deterrent effect vanishes. Russia's actions are deliberately designed to exploit any cracks in this unity, hoping to prove that the alliance is a paper tiger, strong in words but weak in action. The consequences of a weakened NATO would be catastrophic for European security. Without the collective strength and American backing of the alliance, individual nations would become more vulnerable to Russian pressure. The security balance on the continent would shift dramatically in Moscow's favor. Countries on the eastern flank, like Poland and the Baltic states, would face an existential threat, potentially leading to a new arms race as they desperately try to build up their own defenses. This would create a more fragmented, unstable, and dangerous Europe, reminiscent of the dark periods before the Great World Wars. The next steps for the alliance are critical. NATO must find a way to adapt to the new realities of the shadow war. This means developing and procuring cost-effective defenses against threats like cheap drone swarms, as Ukraine has been forced to do. It requires faster decision-making and a clear, unified response to provocations. European members must invest more in their own defense industries and capabilities, not as a replacement for the U.S. commitment, but as a way to become stronger and more reliable partners within the alliance. Unity must be actively rebuilt through shared action and mutual support. Ultimately, this is not just a problem for politicians and generals. The security and stability that NATO has provided have been the foundation for peace and prosperity for generations of Europeans. The drone incident over Poland is a wake-up call. It demonstrates that peace can no longer be taken for granted. The challenge from Russia is real, and it is happening now. The strength of the response from every member of the alliance and the resolve to stand together will determine whether Europe faces a future of continued security or a return to an era of fear, division, and conflict. The future of the continent depends on it.